there's been a lot of discussion, and I mentioned including one of the posts that I put around just agile uh, and people in agile community misusing, abusing the current trend around AI. So, what are your thoughts, Jurgen, Scott, Henrik, on this? You guys can maybe share your perspective on if you're seeing the same thing, or maybe it's just my observation.
See, can you elaborate a little bit? What are you seeing?
So what I'm seeing is people almost pointing fingers to agile community, to agile experts, and saying, "Hey, you're just, you put agile in front of everything." Even this name of this conference, AI and agile. Um, Essentially, the feeling that I got, or how I interpret it, is like, "Hey, you guys are just taking whatever the new trend is and putting agile in front of it." Uh, so I don't know if others are seeing this, but that's something that I've observed. So maybe Henrik, you haven't. Scott, you kind of.
I haven't seen it really, so I don't know what to say really.
That's okay. Yeah. I
But
don't.
I'm very curious if those who have, maybe uh, I'm open to learning.
I've seen it. I've definitely seen it, and I think it's a completely and utterly fair criticism of the Agile community. Earlier where we got going, I think we need to be honest. You know,
Right.
the Agile community is known for running certification scams. We're known for running, for putting the word Agile in front of anything, um, whether it makes sense or not. The religious fervor around some of the methodologies got out of hand and still is out of hand. Various strategies of install my framework and you'll be an agile organization, all that good sort of stuff. Yeah, we shot ourselves in the foot, and I think that, the rest of the world. I'm surprised it took 20 some odd years for people to clue in, but so bad on them. But I don't want to blame the victims either. But still, but yeah, I think people should be very leery about anything coming out of the Agile community these days, given our past track record. But not that I'm bitter.
Yeah, fair enough. I have my own thoughts there. I think it's two-sided. One is that, well, we have been talking about ways of working for 15, 20 years. Part of that was technical, but a big chunk was just a process and human-centric and so on. And we can see that AI is having a huge effect on how we work. I'm not the only one who's seen that. Henrik has seen that with his work and others. So it is obvious that we talk about how agile is making us, or sorry, how AI is making us more agile than ever. Um, on the other hand, yeah, there is a marketing angle to it. Let's just be honest. Nobody is Googling for the word agile at the moment. Companies want AI. So the patient still needs the same medicine. It just needs a different flavor. Okay, fine. We brand stuff with AI somewhere in the title, and then at least it catches their interest, and then swallow the damn medicine, for God's sake. Who cares what the title is on the keynote? So that's just a way of getting attention for those who need it.
Don't ask, just take the pill.
Exactly.
Well, what happens if people are asking just for the pill, and how much do uh, just give the pill, or do you help people understand the root cause? I don't know. I think that's been something also that's been a struggle for me, at least, uh, where people want the framework, where people now, even same thing with, understanding of AI and how people use AI. It's just like, give it to me without fully understanding like what
Yeah.
problem.
So it's human nature to want an easy answer and uh, all that good sort of stuff. But at the same time, it's not as simple as here, take the pill. When you've got people running around saying, "Here, take my snake oil," it's
Yeah.
a really good pill, right? So the audience, the potential customers don't have the background to make some of these decisions. the people selling them potential pills, like, yeah, there's some great pills out there, and yes, you should definitely take them. But I don't go up to some random person in the street and say, "Hey, do you have any pills you'd like me to take right now?" That's going to go poorly. And it shouldn't be a surprise if that goes poorly. I'm going to go to a doctor who with a background in what they're talking about. I'll go to the pharmacist, ask them. I'm not going to go to some yokel in the street and say, "Hey, take my pill." And the challenge is that the Agile community had a lot of yokels who were saying, "Hey, I got some great pills. What do you need? Because I got it. Not so. Yeah, we got to. So
But
there's a
you would
very serious
also
lack of trust in for the Agile community, and I think rightfully so. I wouldn't listen to anything coming out of the Agile community right now.
But going back to the pill community, like don't I see then analogy? I see then consulting companies and a lot of people in the industry as those doctors, and those doctors are prescribing the pills. They are prescribing the frameworks. At least that's been the case in the past. Um, so with that said, I guess maybe just to shift it towards more of agility in AI, like the work is definitely changing, and I'm seeing it. I don't know in what ways are you seeing. What does agility mean to you now? Like, what is it? Has it changed given the last few years changes in AI? What are your thoughts on how AI has changed the meaning, or has it changed the meaning of what does it mean for organizations to achieve organizational agility?
I guess I can add some thoughts there. I see a two-way connection there. One is that I find that an agile mindset helps you use AI more effectively. For example, if you're developing a product, the ability to slice something into small pieces and clearly describe a goal, otherwise known as prompt engineering, in agile is known as writing good user stories. There's a lot of similarities there. So
Mhm.
people that are good at kind of agile planning and development, I find tend to be better prompt engineers, which is great. But also vice versa, that people that are really good at using AI, that helps them become like an order of magnitude more agile than they were before. So there's I see it as a two-way strong connection there.
Yeah.
I believe it works at two levels. First of all, I think the whole shitload of practices that we have developed over the last 15 years or so will have to be replaced at some point, one by the other, because what's the point of doing a retrospective once every 2 weeks with a team of 5 plus or 2 people if you only have 2 people and 5 AIs, and you can talk with each other on a continuous basis? That the need is still there to reflect and to do retros, but the practices will be different. So that's one thing. The practices will completely change. But on the other hand, also some of the principles, the values and principles, in my opinion, need a bit of an update. Because the way things have been phrased in the Agile Manifesto, I don't think they stand the test of time anymore. Like responding to change over following a plan, you need to be the disruptor, not the disrupted in the age of AI. So don't wait for change to happen, because then you might already be too late. Actually, the time to create a moat around your business as a startup is shrinking by the day. So you need to be faster than ever. So there are a couple of things at the level of the values and principles that also need a bit of fine tuning. I wouldn't say replacement, but yeah, pruning and the words and changing them a little bit. But I keep saying we need to be more agile than ever, but perhaps not use the word anymore, because some people are not interested in the agile brand as it is. They just want to survive and thrive in this increasingly uncertain time.
Yeah, so I mostly agree with that. I think I view AI mostly as a tool, and you know, I'll use it to help me become more effective or help my team become more effective. But agility is to me is still all about collaboration. As Henrik was saying, slicing and dicing into small deliverables. Um, and focusing on quality, producing high quality output, doing just enough work, enough planning, enough thinking to do whatever you need to do. So, um, and I'm seeing this a lot. Like, there's some great AI based tools coming out, but it's not replacing the entire team. Like, there's this fantasy fear nonsense of, and it's all in marketing hype. So fair enough. But that all these programmers are going to get replaced. Yeah, some programs are going to be replaced, but it's not because a single tool is replacing a programmer or multiple programmers. It's because some developers are using the better tools more effectively to get their job done. And those people who are using AI to augment their work, they're the ones that are coming out on top. And the people that aren't keeping up, that aren't using the new tools in intelligent ways, they're the ones that are running into trouble. But also, to be fair, I was in India recently, and they're getting hammered right now because the perception is that you can replace a lot of this outsourcing stuff with with AI. And well, no, it's you're replacing with AI augmented teams, and now the price ratio has come down, and a lot of these Indian firms don't seem to be enjoying the price differential anymore because AI has helped everybody else catch up. So yeah, so the dynamics of the marketplace have changed, but it still gets back to people working together using whatever tools. Like we had great tools 5 years ago, we had great tools 10 years ago, and so on. We just now have a new set of great tools. So learn your tools, use them appropriately, but still, bring value to whoever your stakeholders are. So has agility changed? Yeah, the flavor of retrospectives have changed. Yeah, so what? There's been like 20, 30 different flavors of retrospectives over the years. And there'll be 20, 30 different flavors of retrospectives 10 years from now. Okay,
Yeah,
whatever.
absolutely. And I totally love the insight of people in India getting hammered because it just shows that those teams were used to augment the teams in the West. And the augmentation is simply being replaced here. Indian teams become AI co-pilots. Still, the teams in the West are being augmented. It's just somebody else doing the augmentation. So that
And you still need to write a good prompt either way.
Yeah, exactly. So that is a fair issue. But at the same time, some fundamental things change. Like I read a couple of times last week that the prototyping, for example, is now being done, increasingly done by the domain experts because they can use Lovable, they can use Cursor, they can use whatever to create the first versions of what they want to have, and then show a working prototype to a development teams and say, this is what I would like. Now make me a secure version with a solid architecture and so on. So that is very different from a discovery cycle that we were used to in the last 15 years, when the technologists had to come up with a prototype, which was more than just wireframes. And these things fundamentally change how we are being agile, and that is what I find interesting.
Yeah. So if
So,
you could
well,
implement like,
I'd like to jump in on that because
uh,
I've got a background in participatory design, so I've seen multiple rounds, and I fully agree with what you say. Like they're great tools. Some some end users, some business stakeholders, whatever you want to call them, they're going to use these tools to do really cool things to improve the communication. I have no doubt about that. But like this is the fourth or fifth round over the years that I've seen of this sort of thing. And yeah, the tools are better now than they were a few years ago. But it's still we've still got this human behavior issue of will the business stakeholders get off their butts and do that work? Now, the tools are making it easier. Maybe we can prod them a little bit more. But if we're not giving them the support to do that, if the technical people don't have the processes to support this, like, so remember low code, no code from like 20 minutes ago? Uh, you know, like those guys behind those tools, they just spun marketing hype like 4 or 5 years ago. Holy crow. And there was some great tools, and it's just, I'd say the exact same thing. They had some great tools, some great vision, but it never really went anywhere. Right. And the reason why it didn't really go anywhere was because what Jurgen was getting at was that there's this implied process of people use these good tools to do something, but then it gets to a point where you got to bring it to the techie dudes, and there's got to be a reality check of, do you continue on with this low code, no code stuff because we don't really care what you're doing? Is this, have you stumbled into something we've already built before and you just didn't know about it? Are you building, have you actually stumbled into a really great idea that we should take forward with people who know what they're doing? And there's a decision point there. But if you didn't have that decision point in your overall way of working, then the low code, no code stuff would go nowhere. And sure enough, it's pretty much gone nowhere. Like, yeah, and there's some great tools, and everybody's got some good anecdotes of, yeah, this really cool tool. But at the end of the day, it didn't wipe out all the programmers. Like 5 years ago, it was like, we're gonna all these low code, no code tools. Within 2 years, we're gonna wipe out all the programmers. Now the AI dudes, well, within 2 years, we're gonna wipe out all the programmers. And the 4GL guys in the 80s, within 2 years, we're going to wipe out all the programmers. The COBOL guys in the 1970s, within 2 years, we're going to wipe out all the programmers. So I'm calling bullshit on any strategy for the rest of our lives where some knob comes to us and says, within 2 years, we're going to wipe out all the programmers.
Yeah.
Just call bullshit on it.
But at the
And
same
you know what?
In the context
50 years ago, I hope there's somebody watching this video and they're going, oh my God, how long, how did they know 50 years ago that there'd still be programmers around and there'd still be some tech bro knob claiming that within 2 years we're going to wipe out all the programmers? I'm happy to go down saying that and be known for that for 50 years. And if 50 years from now you're having a good laugh because like, what's a programmer? It's like my daughter asking like, what's a typewriter? You know.
Well, what about Scrum Masters? What about Agile coaches? What about people that help others get better at what they do? What is your take on that uh, in context of AI replacing roles? Is it the same thing as developers, or is it different?
Well, if you're really good at that, if you're really truly good at helping others get better, I think you're in a pretty good spot. If you're somebody who's taken a couple days of training and now you're putting out a shingle saying, I'm an agile coach or I'm an agile master, I'm going to help you get better. Yeah, I'm going to replace you with Gen AI. Yeah, and I can easily do it. Just yeah, I'll point my customers to ChatGPT rather than pointing them to a
Yep.
Scrum Master claiming to be an expert. Sorry.
Yeah, I think the same. It's making things increasingly difficult for those who are just faking their way to a nice a nice payout for their gig. Because if you're just bringing knowledge, like, okay, this is what it says on page 12 of the Scrum Guide, we can ask ChatGPT. We don't need a Scrum Master for that, or an Agile coach or whatnot. But we still need people who are making wise decisions in how are we going to be agile in this specific context with all the options that we have available. And that's where a human can still help out. I'm pretty sure. So if we're going to call them agile coaches or ways of working coaches or whatever, I noticed that people are experimenting with new titles because customers are not interested in anything with agile or Scrum anymore. So they're rebranding themselves. Okay, good for them. But they're still trying to help clients in organizing themselves, and that's fine.
I'm going to generalize a little bit on that and just say all roles, all within, let's say, knowledge space, knowledge work.
Yeah.
I think almost all roles, you're going to have pretty much two choices. You're going to either need to change the way you work or find a new job.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like all white collar work, and frankly, all white collar work is being affected by AI. Little chunks of your work are being knocked off by AI. I would say the exact same thing of blue collar work, with the exception I would use the word robot rather than AI. But they're the same. It's a
Mhm.
robot is AI with like a body, but well, and maybe not so bright. But anyways, depends on the robot though. But yeah, so everybody's being affected. There's nothing special about the Agile community, but I think the absolute key point is if you're not qualified, like if you don't have a deep background in whatever it is that you're doing, then you're in huge danger of being replaced by AIs or being partially replaced by AIs because the simple things are being automated. And this has been true for decades, right? Simple stuff is being automated by AI. And if all you're capable of is doing simple stuff, you've got a problem. And the AIs don't care about the marketing BS that you bought into from the people running agile certification schemes. They don't, right? So, if you've hung out your shingle claiming to be far more expert than you actually are, yeah, you're at risk.
So I want to add a bit of a positive spin to this. It's sounding a little bit doomsday here, like,
Yeah,
oh, you
sorry.
have to, we're all screwed, kind of. I, I've been, I guess, if we take the developer's perspective, because that's kind of for the past 2 years, I've been very deeply in that space as a practitioner, but also helping others. And what I've experienced myself, and what I see happen with pretty much everyone else that I've worked with around this, is that as a developer, if we take that as a case in point, I've never had so much fun. I feel like I've gained superpowers. So this notion of you need to change the work is not necessarily, oh no, this sucks. For me, it's more like, this is great. I'm getting so much more stuff done in shorter time. It's just more fun because the stuff that the AI is doing is the stuff that I'm happy to get rid of so I can focus on the actual high level work, on the architecture, on the product design, and I have a much faster feedback loop so I can spend more time with my customer. And I see that kind of in many different types of roles. So yeah, there are going to be some jobs where it just really sucks because you had this job and that job disappears. So yeah, there's going to be some percentage of that. But there's also going to be a very big percentage of, I had this job to do and I spent a lot of my time doing a lot of part of that job wasn't very fun. And now I can let AI do the boring routine stuff and then I can focus on the really fun stuff.
I see the exact same thing, but the problem is, what happens if the stuff that bores us is fun for some people like doing what we would consider to be grunge work. They love doing that, right? So I do a lot of work in the data space, and frankly, those folks are getting hammered right now because they're finally getting really good tools to do a lot of the grunge work. Because like there's some things in the data space where it takes like days or weeks for people to do, and because it's just a lot of grunt, it's just a lot of low end work. Now the AIs are doing it in minutes, sometimes a couple hours, and doing a darn because it's so straightforward and boring. They're doing actually a very good job, probably a better job than the humans would have done. And I see this in many cases. And I don't trust, I don't trust code generated by AI for the most part. So, but the stuff that they're doing, like mapping of data source and stuff like that, there's a lot of grunge work in the data world that can be automated and is being automated. But if you liked doing that, now it's now there's a tool that you're paying $30 a month for the enterprise license to do your job that you used to love. That's a serious problem. And there's a lot of people in that situation. Um,
So I agree. And I think there's also AI where, like, organizations contextualize to their own company. Like, a lot of times you go into organization, try to understand organizational design and architecture, where, like, I think a lot of that you could train AI to understand it, to act as a consultant. And also as a consultant and coach, if you come in, you can leverage that information to help the organization. But two of you have written books recently. Scott, you've been writing also posts, but you've written books in the past. If you could give people, leadership, people on teams, one or two things that they could do tomorrow, what would that be and why?
Critical thinking comes to mind first. That's what I keep saying. We get into a world that where we are increasingly distrustful of everything around us, and we should be. And the number one skill, or maybe a top three skill to develop, is to be critical of everything that we observe, everything that we hear, everything that we do ourselves. Like, I have a team of AIs. For anything that is even remotely slightly important, I ask three AIs, three different models for their input, and then I can compare notes, or I let them criticize each other, just so that the result is better and that they can fact check and verify each other's output. I think that's the kind of thinking that we need to develop as leaders, consultants, whatever we are.
Yeah, I can add. I totally agree with that as a key skill, both for companies but also for kids. Like raising kids, help try to help build that skill in. In practical terms, what I would encourage any leader to do is really two things. One, give yourself and everyone in your company access to the best possible AI tools you can find, best models. The cost is negligible compared to the difference in the capabilities. And number two, create an environment and a culture where people are both encouraged and allowed to experiment a lot. Because it's so hard to plan and make any kind of strategy around this technology, but it's super disruptive. And I find the only way to really understand it is to get your hands dirty and play around with it. So I think companies that do that are just going to have such an incredible advantage compared to others.
Yeah. My advice would be a little more technical. Get a handle on your IP strategies. Get a handle on your data quality strategy. And I know that's hard, and I'm gonna talk about that later. But get a handle, like understand IP. And the reason why I say this is there's a huge risk of you and your staff. Like Jurgen was talking, he has a really good strategy for using AI to generate ideas and all that good sort of stuff. That's sophisticated. And there's a human in the loop, right? Like you got a really smart guy who is using the AIs in a smart way to generate some good IP. Good. Most people are going to one AI and they're, some mediocre prompt and say, write me something about this, blah, blah, blah. And garbage spews out. Like some of it's good, but, later on, the further down in the, whatever got spewed out, it's getting lower and lower quality just because of the nature of the, LLMs. Fair enough. But if you don't know that, and you know what? That writing is better than what that person would have created, more than likely, because they're not writers, fair enough. But now they're publishing it, right? And it's going on web. Like we're seeing all these mediocre blogs getting written, just spewing out the same crap that we've been hearing from actual humans. These slightly different places, and people are spewing this stuff out. And you look at me. Let's take me as an example. I don't have artistic skills whatsoever, so I use AIs like DALL-E and Gemini to create pictures. Way better than anything that I could do myself. But first of all, I'm stealing other people's IP without a doubt. I'm producing more images that are going to get sucked into these AIs to create, and they're nowhere near as good as what the humans are creating, and so on, right? So we're producing lower quality data. We're producing IP. We're producing IP using AIs, presenting it as our own in many cases, where we really are stealing it from others. And this is a serious ethical problem and we're working on all the ethics and we're struggling through all this, right? So, but we're not there yet. And even if we had, I don't think we can create a set of ethics that everybody across the world agrees to. There'll be multiple sets. But even if we had all those, and we have in some cases now, are people signing up? Do they recognize the implications of what they're doing? The answer is not really, right? Because people are lazy. They're going to use the AIs to bang out crapola. So yeah, but the thing is, your organization is responsible for that crapola. And do you understand that? Do you understand the implications of what your people are doing? Do you understand the implications of how they are dumbing down your IP with stolen material? Because eventually somebody's going to clue in, the legal folks are going to clue in that, hey, we've got our problem here. And what you think is your IP might not be. And that could be a very interesting problem to have several years from now when you're in court over something, when you're trying to sell something, when you're trying to do whatever it is you're doing with your IP. So I highly suggest to leaders, do some serious thinking about your IP and lay down the law with your staff. Because there's a lot of and we're seeing examples all the time of people horsing around, and they're good people doing the best they can, all that all this sort of stuff, right? They're not evil, they're not doing it on purpose, but they are doing it, and your organization is responsible for what you publish and for what you share and what you are trying to sell, whatever your business is. So be very, very careful. Oh yeah, IP is intellectual property. My bad. I use acronyms. I'm a tech guy. What can I say? I use acronyms. Thank you for whoever pointed that out.
Maybe just to piggyback on that question, of writing books, and Jurgen's and Henrik's books are both on AI. Scott, you went back to school after I don't know how many years, got your master's in artificial intelligence. What were maybe two biggest learnings, takeaways, challenges? I don't know, however you want to, if you think about that experience of writing a book, you written stuff before. Some of you have written more books, some of you just written stuff. What was maybe the key learnings in context of AI through that process?
Yeah, so I'm writing a book tentatively titled Achieving Continuous Data. And it's all about how do you provide a pipeline of high quality data to to management making data informed decisions, or to AI teams building whatever it is that they're going to build. I have a zero AI policy for that work. Other than like grammar checking and that is built into the work process, your host on that. But zero AI policy. And this is the exact same policy that the school I went to had. They had zero tolerance for AI. Well, there was a graduated AI tolerance for schoolwork, but it was basically zero. When it got, for anything I wanted to do, it was zero. And fair enough. So the AI students couldn't use AI to do their work, which I thought was sort of ironic, but very, very good, because they're forcing the students to actually know what they're doing, like learn, do learning and learn what they're talking about and all good sort of stuff. So yeah, I use zero AI for my writing right now, because I'm highly concerned about the IP quality several years from now. I do not want to be in a position where I really can't say, oh, I wrote this, but I didn't really write this. I don't know who wrote this chapter, or I don't know who wrote this paragraph, because I used AI for it. So, and I got a lot of humans involved. There's a highly collaborative process, and I'm getting a lot of really good input. And yeah, so it's probably slower than I could bang out a book in a week or two using AI. Is something I'd be proud.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's interesting. I'm writing a book. I'm using AI, and I've been writing it for the last 10 years. It just seems like it's a good, like I think Henrik alluded to it, like it's a good companion. I'm excited about writing again, because English being my second language, I always struggled on putting into words what's in my head. And now that process is more fun, more creative. So it's tough. Henrik, Jurgen, what was your maybe takeaways, thoughts on this process of writing or using AI?
Henrik, you go first.
All right. I like experimenting a lot in general with stuff, always experimenting with tools. So I wrote my book this fall. I gave myself a week to write the first draft, locked myself into this cabin right here, and just wrote. And I tried using AI for all kinds of stuff. It's very interesting. I think of it as a scale. From on one end of the scale, you have write everything by hand. If you pull it a little bit further, it's type it on a typewriter. If you pull it even further, it's write it by hand. But it's a scale of how much do you just do the work entirely yourself versus using tools. On the other end of the scale, you have just write a prompt, tell AI to write the damn book for you, and train it on your materials. I've experimented a little bit on that full scale just for fun, and I learned how to get AI to write something that sounds exactly like me. No one could tell the difference, even myself. And I decided not to use that because it didn't feel very nice. It didn't feel fun. I didn't feel, like you'd said, Scott, it didn't feel like me, even though no one would tell the difference. But it was a useful exercise to learn how to do it. And then I ended up with a compromise where pretty much I used AI as an editor and as a pal, as a buddy. So for example, things like I would take a walk and I would talk out loud, dumping my thoughts about some chapter. I would go back, ask AI to write the chapter for me, look at it, rewrite almost every word. But just having it give me a starting point saved me a ton of time. Then in some cases, I would look at a chapter and I would say, what do you think of this chapter? Based on my goals for this book, what do you think of this chapter? And they would say, it's a little bit long. And I would say, can you suggest where to shorten it? It would say, over here. Can you suggest how to shorten it? And it would do it, and then I would change it. So we had a very collaborative situation. Sometimes I would ask, is this chapter too advanced, too simple? And it would say, I think it's a little bit too simple here. This metaphor is a little bit too blah, blah, blah. And then I would make changes. So it was a very tight collaboration, which saved me a ton of time. But at the end of the day, every single word of the book has been vetted and rewritten probably 10 times by me. So I feel very strongly that it is completely my book, human written. But AI has been an incredible strong support. But more like a word processor or a spell checker or a human editor would be a support.
Yeah, I second that. And for me, the most important insight was basically agile principles of teamwork and feedback cycles. I mean, I've written several books before, and it's a very lonesome job writing a book. And at some point, you get beta readers involved. But that is an incredibly annoying process because you have to wait for weeks for them to deliver feedback, if they deliver feedback at all, and so on. And 50 people start in chapter one, and by the time you get to the last chapter, only one person is left. And it's just incredibly annoying. And now I have this team around me that gives me feedback far superior than any beta reader could have given me, and I can configure them for specific kinds of feedback. So, for example, I configured Gemini to find any associations it can make with paradoxes, laws, principles, whatnot on the planet. So, for example, if I write that as an agile coach, you will influence your team because it's impossible not to, then Gemini says, oh, that's the Hawthorne effect or the observer principle. And I'm like, yeah, of course, I should mention the Hawthorne effect here. Makes me look smart.
Yeah. And it's kind of thing a human editor might have helped you do, but it just would have taken longer. You just kind of shortcutted it, right?
You have this team sitting next to you. You can ask it at any moment. And I have another instance doing all the link checking, link finding for me. And another does the deep research. And then Claude checks the structure for me and gives me feedback on intro, a viewpoint and whatnot. So that makes it fun for me to have a much better text in a shorter amount of time than I could have written before just on my own with a copy editor and beta readers. So that felt like super agile to me in my context as a writer.
Yeah.
I can add one thing also, speaking of this topic. Like my book is named the same as a video I made a year ago called Generative AI in a Nutshell. And that video, when I designed that video, I was all sitting in this cottage. I made a script for it, and I set myself a goal, which is kind of impossible normally, which is I want to make a video that appeals to both beginners who don't know anything about AI, but also people who are quite deeply involved in AI. I want the video to appeal to both those audiences, which is really hard. And I made a script, and I used a lot of AI help and really, like critiquing me at every part of the script and saying, where am I going too simple? Where am I going too advanced? How do I reach both these audiences? And it gave me a lot of feedback. And then when I released the video, it really succeeded in that sense. When I look at comments, I get really happy, like, oh, wow, there's like kids saying they love it. There's teachers like saying they use it in class, but also university professors in AI. So I'm like, wow, I don't think I could have achieved that myself without that level of help. So that kind of made a big impact on me. That's why I decided to use AI quite a lot. And that was over a year ago, and the models are a lot better now compared to then. But yeah, it's an important balance because at some point, if you go too far with AI help, it starts becoming AI slop, right? So there's a very fine distinction there, which you need to find that balance so that it still is kind of authentic, your stuff.
And that's probably right now, but like you said, Henrik, like it got like to know you, and like it was very difficult to distinguish between like or we wouldn't be able to distinguish if this is something Henrik wrote or
Yeah.
And you use your values and morals, I guess, to say like I want to do this. But do you see like how quickly AI is evolving, even going back to replacing developers, right? To some extent, what Scott said, like maybe that's not going to ever happen, but to a point where maybe not everybody, but like where yes, this is a tool, but it's slightly not slightly it's more sophisticated tool than anything that we've seen in the last 20 or so years. So what are your thoughts on just the pace of how AI models, or just this whole shift towards AI agents. What are some of your thoughts on just AI agents in general? I think I think all of you have probably written about AI and agents. What do you believe are the guardrails, I guess, that organizations need to put into place as these tools get better before we get agents shipping code and making decisions?
So agents is a very dear topic to me because I co-founded a company. We build agents and I work with an agent platform. So every day I'm coding and making agents. So I'm always thinking about this. And we've been working with clients and kind of always testing the bounds. And it's interesting because it's a new field and everybody is a beginner because we're all learning. But I have learned a few things, kind of like models to help with safety. It's a really important topic because the rate of improvement in these models is absolutely insane. Most people completely underestimate how quickly they're improving. But that also means that, like with any tool, that's, the more powerful the tool it is, the more it can also possibly cause damage, right? Look at nuclear or electricity or fire, right? Any other TNT, right? These technologies are very powerful, but they can cause damage. Some frameworks that I found useful is really pay attention to what jobs you give the agent. And a useful model is comparing it to when you hire a person, right? What's the job you give them and what tools do they need to do the job? So I think of it kind of like a two by two. One is, what is the scope of the job? Is it very general, like handle help desk, or is it very specific, like label incoming tickets by urgency? Right? If it's a more high level job, there's going to be more risk involved. If it's a very specific job, there's less risk involved. Same with tools. How many tools do you give it? Can it send email? Can it make phone calls? Does it have access to money? Or can it only identify which label to put on a ticket, right? And that two by two, in this corner down here, we have very limited scope and very few tools. They're really safe. They really can't do much damage at all. But out on the edges, you have an agent that has a very broad job and has access to all kinds of tools. It's more dangerous, but that doesn't necessarily mean you just give up and say, yeah, things are going to go to hell and that's it. It's just like any risk management. You think of it like, okay, that agent needs more attention. It needs better models. It needs more work on the prompt. It needs more guardrails, more monitoring. And then as the platforms and models improve, it gets easier. But like as it is right now, I wouldn't deploy an AI agent that has a super generic job. I would only deploy an AI agent that has a fairly specific job. But as the models improve, then I think they're going to be able to handle more advanced jobs. But the key thing is, I would say, just like with a human, right? You hire a human, give them a job, trust but verify. Does this person have a track record? If not, give them a limited job. Follow up more often. Give them more limited tools. So I think it's useful, even though I don't think of AIs as humans. I think it's a useful mental model to treat them like you would treat a human, in the sense of how much responsibility you give them, how much limitations, guardrails, oversight. It's just a useful mental framework.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah, I was just about to say the same sort of thing. Treat them like you would staff, right? Trust but verify, understand what they're capable of, but then over time help to grow them, just like you would an agent, right? Like a agentic AI, you would start with something small and safe, and then yeah, that worked, and then new release, you give it more and more ability until finally you sort of hit that. Okay, yeah, that's about what I need, and then you leave it alone.
But in that instance, if we use that analogy, then the better the AI gets understanding our problems and challenges, the more we let it be self-organizing with those agents, to the point where, we don't intervene. We let them run certain things.
That's a key part of the agent design process, is to decide, where does the agent make its own decisions? Where does it make a decision but have a human overlook it? And when do we have a human actually approving or making a decision on their own? And that's a key part of the design process, and that needs to be revisited as the models improve.
But when does it, like, these agents and these tools are becoming smarter than us? At what point do we say, like, who are we to tell you what to do, since you may probably have better insight than us?
But that's still an organizational problem, right? Like, I had staff that were way better at whatever it is that they did than I would ever be. And that's okay, right? But I could still interact with them. I could still guide them. I could still help them grow, and all that sort of stuff. And it becomes a scope of authority scope of responsibility type an issue.
It does, but like I was thinking of this scenario. Imagine you're like a CEO or you're pretty high up and you have AI telling you that you don't need to exist in a sense in that, or you, not necessarily maybe exist is a wrong term. What I meant in
You
terms
don't
of
need your role.
in your role or some, and then now you have a conflict. You have AI probably telling you the right thing, but as a human, and your motivations don't align with that. And it's an
But,
interesting.
and how is that different than a McKinsey consultant telling you you don't need to exist in your role?
Well,
sometimes as well,
you get fired, right?
best
Like
thing to
people
do.
get kicked out.
Yeah, so you fire the consultant, you fire the agent, right? You reconfigure it and you ramp down on what's allowed.
It's an
like
interesting, right? Because it's
But it does raise a question. I think at the end of the day, it boils down to you need to examine your motivations and the reason why you get out of bed and the reason why your company exists. I think of it like you have options. Okay, let's say the AI models get good enough to run a company. They're not nearly there yet, but let's say they get there. Then you have a choice. If you're the owner of the company, do you want to let the AI run the company, or do you want to let a human run the company, or let the pair run the company? Or maybe you want to let the AI buy the company and then you retire. You have options. And at the end of the day, you need to decide. But one thing that's kind of hard to delegate right now, no matter how smart the AI gets, is responsibility. So I think that's going to be a constraining factor. Plus, there's going to be things like regulation involved as well. That might limit a little bit of how much we want to give to an AI.
Yeah, but it's also, it's not really run the company unless it's a small company. It's like it's run a process. It's run a service.
That's a more realistic scenario.
Yeah, but then it gets to the point that if you're able to knock off that, like if you're able to implement that service as an AI agent, um, there's not a lot of barrier to entry there anymore. Like Jurgen was talking about, there's no more moats, or the moats are very shallow now, or very very narrow. But yeah, yeah, sure, you can knock that off now with
And it's not really new, because every time you go to a web shop and you buy something, you are using a fully automated process that used to be run by humans. They've already delegated that to a machine, and we're used to it. It's normal. I think it's just going to be there's going to be more processes like that used to be human run that now become automatable because of AI, but weren't possible before. And the humans don't disappear. They're still there. They're just doing other things, right? People still work at banks, but they don't work with counting money, which they used to have to do in the past, maybe.
Yeah. But there's not as many as well. Right? So
well, actually, that's not true. Like there's still the average kind of unemployment rate globally. If you look at huge tech shifts, it becomes over time about the same as in the past. Otherwise, right now, most of the world would be unemployed. Just looking at things like when we introduced the steam engine or the printing press or farming or the internet, every one of those shifts completely changed so many jobs. But we're still here and we're still somehow very busy.
Yeah, but for those people that lived through that shift and had their employment changed dramatically, it really sucked. Like, we often talk about the Industrial Revolution, and it moved all the farmers into the cities to become, wage slaves in factories. That wasn't a lot of fun for those farmers. And that was a couple generations of people. So I think we need to just remember that, being on the receiving end of we're at a good position, right? We're at the top of the food chain for the most part. We are not on the receiving end of some of these changes. Like I said, I was in India and I was working. There's some very smart people there that are really struggling for employment, and it's not because of anything they did. It was just the business models are changing dramatically. So it's this shift that you're talking about. So it could be a really crappy decade or so for these people, or more, right? So not fun.
Sure. But at the same time, the World Economic Forum predicts that there'll be more new jobs than the jobs that we're going to lose right now. But indeed, for some people, it will suck temporarily. I mean, I have a cousin who wrote the kind of marketing copy that now ChatGPT churns out. in a second. Yeah, he has no job anymore, and he's not very regretful about it because he knew that it was basically crap that companies were paying him for. It was just text that had to be written.
Yeah.
He sees it as an opportunity to reinvent himself. I'm glad that some people see this as a positive thing. I mean, never waste a good crisis, also at a personal level. But yeah, for some people it sucks and they will have to get through somehow, and we should help.
So we're out of time. This was fun. It feels like we could have used more time, but it's a beauty of time boxing too. It is what it is. What would be the last thing you leave people with? Maybe Catherine's question here: how do we bring people along with the changes, or anything that you want to leave us with as a final thought?
I can add one. We're in this very weird shift, right? And there's a lot of speculation about the future, but obviously no one knows, right? We're just guessing. Everyone's just guessing. So I have one suggestion as a general strategy for yourself and the people you care about is that it's a fairly safe bet that no matter what happens in the future, you'll be better prepared for that future if you are fluent in using AI tools. So learn it and encourage other people to just tinker around, learn it, learn how to use it, and then no matter no matter what happens in the future, you'll probably be in a better position to deal with that.
Great.
Yeah, agreed. My take is I call myself a skeptical optimist. Things go wrong on a daily basis, and some things will suck, and not everything is beautiful in the sense of what we get with AI. But ultimately, things will be better, and only if we make that happen together. So the ethical side, as Scott has already mentioned before, is incredibly important. The whole copyright issue has to be resolved by lawmakers. I mean, I saw that my books and probably yours as well, Henrik, have been used by Facebook in the training llama. And I mean, yeah, this shit happens. We'll have to fix these issues, but ultimately AI will be here for good, and that's what I believe in.
Yeah. I think the best recommendation is don't assume that AI is magic. It's not magic. So I think a lot of people are still, and it appears to be magic, some of the really cool things that it does, but it really isn't. And there's an interesting environmental impact as well that we really need to be aware of. Sam Altman was complaining the other day about, please, being polite to your AIs is burning through millions of dollars. I doubt that very highly. Tells me they need to improve their chat logic if that's actually the case, because that's an easy kill. But still, but there is an environment, these images that we create, and you're burning oil. You're effectively burning oil on that. So we need to be smart about this. We're really smart about this. So it's not magic, and care about the environment would be my advice.
Well, thank you guys. Again, this was fun. Seemed like others enjoyed it. So thank you for taking the time and helping us understand your perspectives, because I think I got a lot of insights just from your discussion. So thank you. And I hope to see you in the future. So Jurgen, you got a few minutes if you need to take a quick break or grab some drinks, and we'll continue with Jurgen session in 2 minutes.
Cool. Thanks for hosting us. This was a great conversation, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.